We're not here to repeat the headlines. We're here to find out how everyday Americans are pushing back on this administration. Our program is you, the American people, doing what it takes to preserve democracy. This is Resistance Radio. Welcome back, America. The very first episode of this program covered the protests going on in Coos Bay, Oregon, a coastal town making sure people know how they feel about this administration. Well, we're back in Coos Bay, but this time we're speaking with one of their neighborhood leaders, someone making sure the community knows what's going on in local politics. But that's not all. You see, winning local elections actually affects MAGA's agenda in some big ways. Well, Chris, welcome to the show.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on.
So tell us a bit about yourself and your involvement in politics.
Yeah, about 3 years ago, I retired from a 30-year career of being a college teacher. I've always been really interested in politics, but I never really did much more than to vote and maybe donate a few dollars to certain campaigns. But after my wife and I retired to rural Oregon, I wanted to get a little bit more involved, so I started going to some of the local county Democratic meetings. And that's where I sort of got involved with this group that eventually ended up doing a lot of door knocking and canvassing our local area.
This past May, you guys had an election for school board in Coos County, is my understanding. Tell us what was going on.
Yeah, during the previous elections before we moved out here, a group of MAGA Republicans had taken over the local school board. By controlling 3 of these seats, these folks had managed to start banning books and reducing funding of the schools by allowing vouchers to be paid by homeschooled families. So that was draining the funds a bit. And they also were mostly an anti-tax group, so they were working to keep property taxes low, which again starved those schools and school district. And so we targeted these 3 members of the school board and helped to fund and support candidates to replace those MAGA candidates who mostly wanted to reduce their tax burden and receive financial support for their own families who homeschooled their kids. It was hard to believe that we had school board members who did not send their kids to the public schools. They were very successful business people in the community, and so a lot of people knew their names, and so it was relatively easy for them to get elected because they had this name recognition. One of the things that we noticed is that the Republican Party was able to pay for a lot more signs than the Democrats were for some of these local elections. And so it would look like there was like 80% Republicans, but in fact, it was much closer to, I think in the county that I'm in, there's like 12,000 registered Democrats and 16,000 registered Republicans.
So to get these people out of office, it of course was a team effort by local Democrats. What did you guys do?
Yeah, it was a very good effort by the local Democratic Party. Our head there did a great job of setting up training sessions for us. So we had this new program that was called a Neighborhood Leader Program. And so we designated one of our Democratic constituents to be a neighborhood leader for each area. And then they worked with a team of people, and we got training in this software program called Minivan, which allowed us to dive into the individuals that were in our neighborhood, and we could tell who was a registered Democrat, who was a registered Republican, who was an independent, and then we could pick and choose kind of which were the most effective places for us to go and chat with people.
And I'm assuming you're sending your people to get out the vote from Democrats. Is that right?
Yeah, that's mostly right. Sometimes we also had some information about voting histories and who voted and who didn't. And so sometimes we enlarged that to include independent voters as well. Mostly, though, it was Democrats. And that was something that was kind of new to me. I was assuming when we were door knocking that our main job was going to be to convince people that those candidates that were running as Democrats were the best candidates and that. And it turns out we didn't have to do that so much. We really just had to encourage people to vote. And with especially these smaller elections like school boards or, in an off year election, a lot of times people are confused because some of the ballots have races in them that are nonpartisan, so people don't declare whether they're Democrats or Republican. We could put information for each candidate together and get that information out to those folks. But it was a very successful way to go, and we were very, I think, very efficient at talking to lots of people in our county.
Take us to you're out there on the first day knocking on doors. Did you have somebody with you, or were you going solo?
We mostly worked in pairs. I think that makes it easier in some ways, but not always. And as we we had some areas that we didn't have people that lived in that area, and so I would sometimes just go by myself to some of those areas. But it was great to meet so many people and so many of my neighbors. In rural Oregon, you get the sense that there are very few Democrats, but by knocking on all these doors and looking at the minivan results, it turns out there's lots of Democrats. And it seems like almost everywhere we're pretty evenly split. And once you realize that, then you realize that it only takes a few votes to move an election one way or another. So that made me feel much better. And it was a good perspective talking to people. Everybody was very nice. We didn't really run into any kinds of problems. Probably dogs were the biggest obstacle, if you can imagine that. But it was a very positive experience. It was good to get to know some of the folks around, and we set it up so that with this neighborhood leader program, I had the same area that I did about 4 times during the election. So about once a month leading up to a primary and then the general election, I would go visit those same places. So I got to know some of those people quite well.
Yeah, so it's not just a one and done. This is how you guys set it up. Was you're actually going to get to know and spend some time with these folks.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it worked out well. They would remember me from last time, and, oh, you're that
Okay.
guy again. Yeah. And we have mail-in voting in Oregon. And so you can vote over about a 3-week period. And so the last time I would go out, a lot of times people said, "Yep, I did the vote. I turned it in. I did the whole thing." And so it was great hearing that kind of response from folks that I had talked to previously.
So as you went out and talked to Democrats and independents, you of course got better at this. What's some tips of doing the door knocking that you could share with us?
Yeah, as I became more experienced, I got better at thinking about what it's like to be on the other side of the conversation when you're approaching someone's door and that sort of thing. So I kind of learned that there were a couple tips that were really helpful. One is as you're walking up, I would think a little bit about how can I comment on someone's flower beds or their attractive porch or their tomatoes that are getting ripe or whatever, and use that kind of thing as an icebreaker. I did a lot of canvassing and door knocking on the weekends, and so out here we have a lot of football fans. And as I was walking up to the doors, I could hear a football game inside, and so I could kind of quickly figure out, are these people supporting University of Oregon Ducks or Oregon State Beavers or Seattle Seahawks or the 49ers? And then I would talk with them about those sports teams in a little bit, in a little sense. And that always, everyone seems to like sports teams. So that was kind of a good way to go. And I think more than anything else, everyone likes to be recognized. And so
Uh
providing
huh.
them with a compliment to get things started is a really good way to get those conversations started.
What time of day, did you guys go out to try to? I mean, imagine that middle of the weekdays, people are out at work. So
Yeah, usually on the weekends I would start around 11. A lot of people are getting home from church about that time, and so sometimes you would meet people on their driveways or that sort of thing. And so that was a good time. On in the on the Pacific time zone, 11 is when those football games start. So that's another way to think about that. But then we would go and we'd pretty much stop at like 4 in the afternoon, not focus so much on dinner time. The few weekdays I'd usually start around 4 and try to work until about 6. Oftentimes I picked those places to do like apartment buildings where I could do a bunch of them in a relatively short amount of time.
You are targeting when you're pretty sure people are going to be home, but there's also, of course, times there wasn't somebody there. Did you leave, materials for them or?
Yeah, we often had candidate cards and things that we could hook onto a doorknob or something like that. The other thing that was great about minivan, though, is that as you're walking up to a house, you can see the names of the people, their political affiliation, if they've registered in that way. And most people are independent. I think the numbers for the area I was working was something like 15% Democrat, 20 something percent Republican, and about 35% independent. So a lot more undecided independent folks in that pool.
Well, how many homes were you able to reach?
I think it was around 600 or so, something like that. So
Wow.
it was good. Yeah, no, it was. I mean, this is stretched out over several months.
Yeah.
I really actually enjoyed doing it, and it was fun. Most of the time, I had somebody along with me, but not all the time.
All right. Campaign season comes to an end. The votes get tallied up. You all in this area that's slightly more Republican, you all got all three of those MAGA school board members that you really needed to get out of there. They're gone. A win for the Democrats, but even more important, a huge economic win for the school. But also, in preparing for the show, I did some research on the election and talked to some other folks. There were actually multiple school board elections going on in the area. 12 seats open. The Democrats got 11 of those seats. That is an effective campaign. That really needs to happen in every single local party around the country. So tell us a little bit more about the analytics of the voter behaviors. I don't have those numbers. Tell us what you learned from that.
Our post-election analysis indicated that something like 60% of the voters that we canvassed did go to the polls and vote, compared to about half that percentage of folks who we didn't do any door knocking with. And so doubling that participation rate made it so that the election was so close, but we won all three of those votes. So that was great.
So I want to repeat what you just said. The participation rate, it doubles if a contact's made. Number that I do have. In that last election, there was one contest, and the separation was just 58 votes. So if you're missing a door knocker, that doesn't go the way you want. For those that want to put a real hurting on MAGA, door knocking, getting involved with your local party, that's how we win elections. So here it is. Here's an answer. Chris, this election's done. What's next on the agenda?
Yeah, so right now we're in a little bit of a hiatus, and we'll start gearing up again in February, making plans for what areas to especially hit. We're especially interested in another county commissioner position that's up. We have one last MAGA Republican on our commission, and we're
Mm-hmm.
going to try to remove him. We've got a really good candidate that's going to be very effective, I think. And so we'll start off in February, probably doing a lot of home home meetings with the candidates, so people in each neighborhood can come and meet them. And those are little fundraisers. Usually we have, food and wine and that sort of thing.
So there's um, a lot of folks out there that are, of course, they get politically active and interested on the national races, and these local ones, like you've already said, like the school board makes a very critical thing for the county local Democrats to win. This county commissioner, why is it so important?
Yeah. So what happens right now? The county commission here is 3 people, and we have 2 regular non-MAGA folks. They're not necessarily I think one's a Democrat and one's a Republican, but they're both reasonable people.
Uh huh.
And so the county commission really runs the county budget. And so it's incredibly important. And so right now we have a commission that has supported Oregon's sanctuary state status. And so
Okay.
previously they didn't, and the county commission was saying, no, we have to help ICE and all of that sort of thing. So it's been a tremendous change from the last election, because we were able to get one of the county commissioners flipped.
So winning locally means, in a way, you're winning nationally too. Chris, thanks for giving us the insights on this in terms of national election importance and the tips for the door knocking. I just really looking forward to hearing what you guys pull off with that county commissioner seat and the other things happening in Coos County.
Yes, we'll stay in touch, and I'm very optimistic about this next go around. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
All right. Well, thank you again. Have a good rest of your day. Chris's volunteerism wasn't a long slog of painful conversations. He generally enjoys getting to know his neighbors. You can hear it in his voice. So, doing something for the resistance doesn't have to be what you don't like to do. Instead, there's opportunities for you just doing what you like. Right now, there's artists writing new songs. Others are writing editorials. People are gathering in homes. There's a sea of people doing what it takes to preserve democracy. So, where is your talent at? What are you going to be doing next? We hope you've enjoyed the show and hope you'll join us for the next one. Have a story that needs to be told? Send an email to russellspurradio@gmail.com. Support for our show can be sent through Venmo at Resistance Radio. And remember, none of us are free until we are all free.
Resistance Radio.